When I was 56 years old, my only son sold my house right out from under me. He packed up his wife and his boy and moved 3 states away. They left me exactly $150 in an envelope on the kitchen counter, next to a note that said, "You will figure it out." 15 years later, my grandson typed my name into a search engine for a school project and called me crying so hard he could barely speak. Within 10 hours, I had over 180 missed calls from the same son who threw me away like old furniture. Before I go on, tell me in the comments where you are watching this from tonight. And if you have ever had to fight for your own worth against people who were supposed to love you, hit that like button and subscribe because this story is for you. My name is Carol. I am 71 years old now. And for a long time I believed that love was something you earned by giving everything you had until there was nothing left. I learned the truth the hard way, on a cold October morning, standing on a porch that used to be mine, holding an envelope that used to be my whole life. But before I tell you about that morning, you need to understand who I used to be. I raised Daniel by myself for the first 6 years of his life, after his father left us with nothing but unpaid bills and a broken heater. I worked 2 jobs. I cleaned offices at night and sold sandwiches at a deli during the day. When I met my husband Walter, a quiet, kind man who ran a small hardware store, I finally felt like life was giving me a second chance. Walter never had children of his own, but he loved Daniel like his own blood. He taught him how to fix a leaking pipe, how to change a tire, how to shake a man's hand and look him in the eye. Walter built us a small but sturdy brick house on Maple Street, and for almost 30 years, that house held every good memory I had. Daniel grew up, went to college on money Walter and I saved for years, and eventually married a woman named Vanessa. I welcomed her into our family with open arms. I threw her a bridal shower in my own backyard. I gave her my mother's wedding ring because I did not have a daughter of my own. When their son Ethan was born, I cried for 2 days straight from pure joy. I used to babysit him every single weekend. I taught him how to bake banana bread. I taught him how to ride a bike in that same backyard where Daniel used to play. Then Walter got sick. It was fast, crueler than anything I could have imagined. 6 months from diagnosis to funeral. I buried my husband on a rainy Tuesday in October, and I remember standing at that graveside thinking that at least I still had my son, my daughter-in-law, and my grandson. At least I still had family. I did not know yet that grief makes you weak in ways you cannot see. I did not know that the people closest to you can smell that weakness like sharks smell blood in water. 2 weeks after the funeral, Daniel came to visit. He brought a stack of papers with him, folders full of documents. He told me they were insurance papers, hospital bills, forms that needed my signature so the life insurance could be released and the medical bills could finally be closed out. I was so exhausted from crying, so foggy from the medication my doctor had given me to help me sleep, that I did not read a single page carefully. I trusted my son. I signed everywhere he told me to sign, and I thanked him for taking care of things because I truly believe that is exactly what he was doing. 3 weeks later, I went out for a short walk to clear my head, the way I did most mornings since the funeral. When I came back, my key would not turn in the lock. I thought maybe I was just shaking too badly from the cold. I tried again. Nothing. I looked through the front window into my own living room, and my heart stopped. The couch was gone. The bookshelf Walter built with his own hands was gone. Every photograph, every lamp, every trace that a life had ever been lived inside those walls, gone. I stood on that porch for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes, before I noticed the small white envelope taped to the door. Inside was exactly $150 in crumpled bills, and a note in my son's handwriting. Said, "You will figure it out." That was it. No goodbye. No explanation. No apology. Just $150 and 6 words that would haunt me for the next 15 years of my life. I found out later, through a neighbor who still had my new phone number, that Daniel had used that fake power of attorney to sell the house Walter built for us. He sold it for far less than it was worth, just to get it done quickly and quietly. He emptied our joint savings account, the one Walter and I had built for 30 years. He packed up Vanessa and little Ethan, and they moved 3 states away, to a life I would not see for 15 years. I was 56 years old, freshly widowed, and suddenly homeless, with $150 to my name. If you are still with me, drop a comment right now and tell me where you are watching from, because what happened next changed the rest of my life, and I promise you it is worth staying for. I will not spend too much time on those dark early days because honestly, some of them are too painful to relive out loud. I slept in my car for 11 nights. I applied for every job I could find, even though most employers looked at a 56-year-old widow and quietly passed me over. Eventually, a woman named Rosa, who ran a small diner outside of town, gave me a chance washing dishes and waiting tables. She let me sleep in the tiny storage room behind the kitchen until I saved enough for a room of my own. I will tell you the rest of that story later because it matters, and because it explains everything that happened 15 years later. But right now I want to take you to the night that changed everything. The night my phone would not stop ringing. It was a Tuesday evening and I was sitting in my study, the kind of quiet room I never could have imagined owning back when I was sleeping in the back of a diner. My phone buzzed against the wooden desk over and over, a sound I had almost forgotten because so few people ever called me anymore. I looked at the screen. Missed call, missed call, missed call. Within an hour there were over 40. By the next morning, the number had climbed past 180. I did not recognize a single one of the numbers, but somehow, deep in my chest, I already knew who they belonged to. I let the phone buzz one more time before I finally picked it up and answered without saying a word. On the other end, I heard fast, shaky breathing, and then a voice that cracked halfway through a single word. Grandma. That word hit me harder than anything had in 15 years. It was Ethan. The last time I had seen my grandson, he was 7 years old, laughing in my backyard, completely unaware that his parents were quietly stripping away everything I owned inside the house behind him. Now his voice sounded like a grown man breaking apart. I stayed silent for a long moment, letting 15 years of distance sit heavy in the space between us. Grandma, please do not hang up, he said, his voice trembling. I did not know. I swear on everything I did not know any of it. I was doing a research project for one of my college business classes today. My professor wanted us to study successful women entrepreneurs who came from nothing. I typed your name into the search bar just to see. Honestly, I did not even expect to find anything. And then this article came up. It said you built one of the largest home care and senior support companies in the entire state, from absolutely nothing starting 15 years ago. It said you were homeless before you built it all. Grandma, is that really you? I closed my eyes and let out a slow breath. My apartment, my company headquarters, my entire life now, felt worlds away from the chaos exploding on the other end of that phone call. Yes, Ethan, I finally said, my voice calm, carrying the weight of everything I had survived. "'Tis me." A sob tore out of him, raw and painful. He was 22 years old now, but in that moment he sounded exactly like the little boy who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during Sunday afternoon cartoons. "They told me you left us," he said, the words spilling out fast and desperate. "Mom and Dad always told me you ran off after Grandpa died. They said you took money that was not yours and disappeared because you could not handle being alone. But this article, Grandma, it said you were left with almost nothing. It said you slept in your car. Grandma, what did they do to you?" I did not raise my voice. I never needed to. True strength does not require shouting. "Your parents made choices, Ethan," I told him steadily. "They chose to take everything I had while I was grieving your grandfather. And they chose to lie to you about it for 15 years. I did not run away from anyone. I built my life back up from nothing, brick by brick, while they were telling you stories to make themselves look innocent." I could hear him crying harder now, the weight of his parents' true nature finally crashing down on him. But before he could ask another question, I heard a sudden commotion on his end of the line. A door slammed open. Thin gasp. There was a struggle, plastic scraping against skin, and then the call went silent for half a second before a new voice spoke into the phone. It was Daniel, my son. The man who once looked me in the eye, smiled, and quietly sold the roof over my head while I was still crying at his father's grave. "Mom," his voice came through fast and breathless. "Is that really you? Oh my God, we have been trying to find you for years. You have to believe me." My grip on the phone tightened, but my heart did not race. I felt no sudden rush of motherly warmth, only a cold, clear kind of clarity. The son who had thrown me away like garbage was suddenly desperate to reconnect. Not because he missed his mother. Because he had just discovered his mother was worth millions. "Mom, please say something," he begged. His voice syrupy sweet in a way that made my stomach turn. "My business is in serious trouble. We are facing something catastrophic." When Ethan showed us that article, I could not believe it was really you. "You have to tell me where you are. We are family, Mom. You have to help us." I listened to his frantic breathing, picturing the panic and greed twisting behind his familiar face. He was waiting for me to be the same forgiving, naive mother he had left crying on an empty porch 15 years ago. But that woman was gone. They had buried her the same day they handed me a crumpled $150. I pulled the phone away from my ear, and without a word, I pressed the red button. The call ended with a short, final click. I set the phone gently back on my desk and let the silence of my apartment settle around me. He had made the first move. The next one would be mine. If karma has ever found its way back to someone in your life, type it in the comments below. And if you believe people always eventually show their true colors, hit that like button right now because we are just getting started. I want to take you back to the beginning of my second life so you understand exactly how far I had come by the time that phone rang. After Rosa took me in at that little diner, I worked harder than I had ever worked in my life. I saved every extra dollar. I noticed how many elderly customers came into that diner alone, struggling to carry their own trays, struggling with simple errands, with no one to help them. One evening, an old man named Mr. Doyle came in, clearly confused, unable to remember if he had already eaten. I sat with him, made sure he ordered something warm, and walked him safely to his car afterward. He came back the next week and asked if I would consider checking on him a few times during the week. Just simple things, groceries, rides to appointments, someone to talk to. He offered to pay me. That was the very first seed of what would eventually become my company. Word spread slowly, one elderly customer to another, one worried family member to the next. Within 2 years I had 5 clients. Within 5 years, I had a small team of caregivers working under me. Within 10 years, I had built a licensed home care agency that specialized in helping seniors, especially those who had been abandoned or financially abused by their own families. Something about that mission always felt deeply personal to me, though I never fully understood why until this story reached its end. By the time Ethan found that article about me, my company operated in over 60 locations across the state. I had never remarried. I never had more children. My work became my family, and the seniors I served became the children I still had left to protect. Which is exactly why what happened next mattered so much. 2 days after that phone call, Daniel requested a meeting at my company headquarters. I agreed, mostly because I wanted to look him in the eye one more time and see exactly who he had become. He walked into my private conference room wearing a suit that was clearly too expensive for a man claiming financial trouble. He did not waste time with apologies. He walked straight to the long glass table and slid a thick folder across the surface toward me. Inside were spreadsheets, projections, and a proposal asking me for a $2 million loan to save his failing construction company. He spoke quickly, using words like temporary cash flow issue and short-term market correction, trying to sound like a confident businessman instead of a desperate man drowning in his own decisions. I sat back in my chair, folded my hands in my lap, and let him talk. I did not interrupt once. I simply watched the sheer audacity of it all unfold in real time. Then Vanessa spoke up. She was sitting beside him in a silk blouse that likely cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her legs crossed with practiced elegance. She leaned forward and told me that while the business was urgent, we also needed to discuss Ethan. She said growing up without a grandmother had left a painful gap in his life. She actually looked me in the eye and said my sudden disappearance 15 years ago had caused him deep emotional damage, and that I owed him a trust fund to make up for the years I had abandoned him. I was the one who abandoned them, according to her twisted version of events. These were the same 2 people who had tricked a grieving widow into signing away her own home. These were the same 2 people who packed their bags and drove away with everything I owned, leaving behind a crumpled $150 and 6 cruel words. Now they sat across from me, rewriting history, casting themselves as the victims of a woman who had simply vanished. I did not scream. I did not throw the folder back at them. The anger inside me was not a burst of fire. It was cold and patient, like ice slowly cracking a rock from the inside. I looked at the $2 million proposal, then at Vanessa, then at Daniel. I let the silence stretch out for almost 15 seconds. I sighed softly and let my shoulders drop slightly, as if I was a tired old woman genuinely wrestling with guilt over the past. That hesitation was a test, and Daniel failed it immediately. He slammed his hand down on the glass table, the sharp crack echoing through the room. His face turned red, and the mask of the respectful businessman shattered completely. He pointed a shaking finger at me and told me to stop playing games. He shouted that I was 71 years old and had no real use for millions of dollars, while my real family struggled to survive. He leaned in close enough that I could see the vein pulsing in his neck, and he said the words that sealed his fate forever. He told me I owed them this money. He said I owed them for disappearing all those years ago and leaving them to fend for themselves. That was the final drop that made the glass overflow. He truly believed his own lies. He believed that because I had stayed quiet for 15 years, I was weak. He mistook my silence for surrender. I looked at his angry, entitled face, and I no longer saw my son. I saw a stranger who had simply run out of people to take advantage of. I kept my expression completely calm, hiding the trap I was already preparing to spring. Before I could respond, the heavy doors of the conference room burst open. They hit the wall with a crash loud enough to make everyone jump. Standing in the doorway, chest heaving, eyes wide with desperate energy, was Ethan. He looked like he had run straight from campus. His backpack slipped off his shoulder and hit the floor with a dull thud. He did not even glance at me. His eyes locked directly onto his parents. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" Daniel snapped. His voice dropping into a tone of forced authority meant to hide his own panic. Vanessa stood quickly, smoothing down her blouse, reaching a hand toward him with a trembling smile. Ethan ignored it completely. He stepped further into the room, breathing hard. "You lied to me," he said, his voice shaking but growing louder with every word. "My whole life you told me she abandoned us. You told me she took money that was not hers and disappeared because she could not handle being alone." Vanessa's face drained of color. She glanced at me nervously, then back at her son. "Sweetheart, please, we can talk about this at home. This is not the time." "Not the time," Ethan repeated, a bitter laugh escaping him. "You are literally begging her for $2 million right now. The same woman you told me was selfish and cruel. I read the article on my way here. I saw the dates. She lost everything the exact same month we moved into that huge new house across the country. You stole from her. You stole everything she had." The air in the room went completely still. Daniel's face twisted into something ugly. Whatever mask of respectability he had been wearing vanished entirely, replaced by something cornered and vicious. "Shut your mouth," Daniel roared. He crossed the room in 2 quick strides and raised his hand toward his own son. I did not think. Moved. At 71 years old, you might assume my reflexes would be slow, but a grandmother's instinct to protect does not weaken with age. Before Daniel could bring his hand down, I stepped directly between them and shoved him back with a force that surprised even me. He stumbled against the edge of the glass table. "Do not you ever raise your hand to him again," I warned, my voice dropping low and sharp. The room fell into complete silence. Daniel stared at me, rubbing his chest where I had pushed him, his breathing ragged. "You have no right to interfere," he spat, pointing a shaking finger at me. "He is my son. You do not get to walk back into our lives after 15 years and tell me how to raise my own child." I stood my ground, keeping Ethan tucked safely behind me. I could feel him trembling, but he did not step away. I looked at the man I had raised, and in that exact moment, the very last thread of patience I had left for him simply snapped. The tired, guilty woman they thought they were manipulating was completely gone. In her place stood a woman who had survived homelessness, grief, and betrayal, and had built an empire from the ashes they left behind. "You are right," I said, letting the words settle heavily over the room. "I do owe you something. I owe you both exactly what you deserve for the last 15 years. Daniel slowly lowered his hand. His anger cooled almost instantly, replaced by a flicker of hope, because the word "oh" had triggered something desperate and greedy inside him. "Tomorrow night," I continued, "my company is hosting its annual charity gala downtown. Every major investor, every partner, every reporter who covers our work will be there. I want you both there. Dress well. Be on time. Ethan will be attending as my personal guest." Daniel and Vanessa exchanged a quick, calculating glance. "And the loan?" Daniel asked, his voice trembling with renewed hope. "The $2 million. I met his greedy, desperate gaze and gave a slow, measured nod. "Tomorrow night I will take the stage, and in front of everyone I will announce my decision about the future of everything I have built. Be there, and you will get exactly what is coming to you." Daniel's eyes lit up with blind ambition. A smug, victorious smile crept onto Vanessa's face. They believed they had already won. They had no idea they were walking straight into the ending they deserved. If you think karma was already circling them, drop a comment below. And do not forget to hit like, because what happens next is the moment this entire story has been building toward. After they left my office, I sat alone in the silence for a long time. I did not cry. I did not shake with anger. That grief had been buried 15 years earlier, somewhere between a cold October porch and a diner storage room that once served as my only bedroom. I picked up the phone on my desk and called Richard, my longtime attorney and the head of my company's internal investigations team. Within the hour, he walked into my office carrying a thick leather folder. "You asked me to look into Daniel's construction company," he said, setting the folder down gently on the table. "I did more than look, Carol. Found everything." He spread the documents across the table, page after page of financial records, bank statements, and court filings. Daniel was not simply facing a slow market. He was drowning in criminal debt. For the past 3 years, he had been siphoning money from client projects to fund a lifestyle far beyond what his failing business could support. Designer suits, luxury vehicles, expensive vacations, all paid for with money that never belonged to him. He had built a web of fake vendor invoices to hide the trail, but eventually, the trail became impossible to hide. 2 months earlier, a group of investors had noticed inconsistencies in his company's financial reports. They hired a forensic accounting firm, and the audit uncovered a staggering gap in his accounts. Daniel had embezzled almost $3 million from his own investors. He was currently under an active federal investigation. Suddenly everything made sense. The desperate calls. The sudden need to reconnect after 15 years of silence. The urgent demand for exactly $2 million. He did not need my money to save his business. He needed it to quietly cover a hole in his accounts before federal agents came knocking on his door. He was hoping to use the mother he once threw away as a human shield against his own crimes. Richard closed the folder and looked at me seriously. "We have everything we need, Carol. The wire transfers, the false paperwork, all of it. Should I call the authorities tonight?" I stood up and walked slowly to the window, looking out over the city lights. I thought about the gala tomorrow night. I thought about Daniel putting on his expensive suit, believing he had already won. I thought about Vanessa smiling for the cameras, dreaming about the money that was never coming. I wanted him to feel that victory fully, before I took it away completely. "No," I said quietly. "Let him walk in feeling like a king. Let him believe he has already won everything. Because a fall from the bottom step is easily forgotten, Richard. I want him to fall from the very top." The next afternoon, I met Ethan at a quiet coffee shop near his campus. He looked exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed. His shoulders slumped under the weight of everything he had learned in the last 48 hours. He slid into the booth across from me, staring down at the table. I did not offer him a comforting hug or a soft smile. This was not a family reunion. This was preparation. I reached into my bag and placed a small silver flash drive on the table between us. I told him that everything inside it was the full, undeniable truth about his father. I told him Daniel was not facing a temporary business slowdown. I told him about the embezzlement, the fake invoices, the federal investigation quietly closing in. I told him his parents were not searching for a family reunion. They were searching for someone to blame, someone to hide behind. Ethan stared at the drive like it was something dangerous. His breathing grew shallow. He asked how they could lie so easily for so long to everyone, especially to him. I told him that lying had always come easily to his parents, because greed makes deception feel like survival. I asked him to picture a 56-year-old widow, coming home from her husband's funeral, only to find the locks changed and the house completely empty. I described the silence of that porch, the crumpled $150, the note telling me to figure it out. They stole everything I had while I was grieving the only man who ever truly protected me, I told him. And then they drove away and never looked back. A heavy silence settled over the booth. Ethan covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking as he cried. Let him. I let the truth burn away whatever illusions he still had left about the people who raised him. It is a painful thing to watch someone lose their parents while they are still alive, but sometimes the infection has to be cut away before real healing can begin. When his breathing finally slowed, I leaned forward and pushed the flash drive gently toward him. Tomorrow night, I told him, the entire city will be watching this gala. Your parents will be sitting in the front row, wearing clothes bought with stolen money, expecting to be crowned as my heirs. Right before I take the stage, I want you to walk to the back of the ballroom. There will be a tall man in a dark gray suit standing near the service doors. Give him this drive. Ethan looked up at me, his eyes wide and red. Who is he? He asked. I did not answer directly. I simply told him that for his entire life, his parents had made every choice for him. What he believed, who he trusted, how he saw the world. But tomorrow night, the choice would finally belong to him alone. He reached out with a trembling hand and closed his fingers tightly around the flash drive. He looked at me and gave a single determined nod. The battle lines were drawn. If you believe the truth always finds its way out eventually, type it in the comments right now. And if you are proud of Ethan for choosing honesty over comfort, hit that like button because the gala scene is about to change everything. The following night, the grand ballroom of the downtown hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers and camera flashes. It was my company's biggest event of the year, filled with investors, partners, and journalists who had followed my story for over a decade. Outside, on the red carpet, Daniel and Vanessa stood in the center of the media frenzy, soaking up attention they had done absolutely nothing to earn. Daniel wore a tailored navy suit that fit him perfectly. Vanessa stood beside him in a stunning gown, diamonds glittering at her wrists. I knew exactly how expensive that outfit was, because the fraud alerts on one of my corporate accounts had been buzzing on my phone all afternoon. I stood alone on the upper balcony, hidden in the shadows, watching the scene unfold below. A reporter shoved a microphone toward Daniel, asking about his sudden reappearance and his role in my company. Daniel smiled his practiced, charming smile and wrapped an arm around Vanessa's waist. My mother is an incredible woman, he said smoothly, loud enough for the cameras to catch every word. She built something truly special here. But she is getting older, and running a company this large takes a toll. I am here to help carry that weight. It is my duty as her son to step up and take care of her, the same way she once took care of me. Vanessa nodded beside him, placing a manicured hand over her heart, playing the role of the devoted daughter-in-law to perfection. I gripped the cold railing of the balcony. The poison behind his words was almost impressive. This was the same man who had left me with $150 and 6 cruel words. This was the same man currently under federal investigation for embezzling almost $3 million. A sharp-eyed journalist spotted me on the balcony, and within seconds, dozens of heads turned upward. Camera flashes redirected toward me. Daniel followed their gaze, his charming smile faltering for a brief second before he quickly recovered, beaming up at me with practiced adoration. "Mrs. Carroll," a reporter called out, "your son just spoke about the future of your company. Are you officially stepping down tonight?" The entire ballroom went quiet. Hundreds of eyes, including the greedy, hopeful eyes of my son and his wife, locked onto me. I rested my hands on the railing and let the silence stretch out. "Tonight is a very special night," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room. "It is a night about truth, about legacy, and about the future. I have made my decision about what happens to everything I have built. Tonight, everyone in this room will understand exactly why." The crowd erupted into excited chatter. Below, Daniel's eyes lit up with blind triumph. Vanessa let out a visible sigh of relief. They believed they had already won. They had no idea their world was about to collapse in front of everyone they had spent the evening trying to impress. A short while later, the heavy curtains parted, and I stepped onto the main stage. The bright lights washed over the crowd, and a hush fell over the entire ballroom. Standing right at the front, pressed against the velvet rope separating the stage from the crowd, were Daniel and Vanessa, practically vibrating with anticipation. Daniel had already unbuttoned his suit jacket, ready to walk up the steps and accept what he believed was his crowning moment. 15 years ago, I began, letting the words settle over the silent room. I stood on an empty porch with nothing but a crumpled $150 in my hand. Had no home. I had no family beside me. I had absolutely nothing. A soft murmur rippled through the crowd. To them, this was simply the beginning of the inspiring story they already knew. The widow who rebuilt her life from nothing. Down in the front row, Daniel smiled wider, nodding along, still believing this was the introduction to his own grand moment. "I built everything from the ground up," I continued, keeping my eyes locked on my son. "I spent 15 years creating a company that protects the exact kind of people who once had everything taken from them, the way everything was once taken from me. But true legacy is not only about what you build. It is about who you choose to leave it to." The tension in the room grew thick. Daniel leaned forward, his shoes pressing against the velvet rope, ready to hear his name announced to the world. "Tonight," I said, my voice dropping into something sharp and final, "I am making the complete and permanent decision about the future of everything I own. Effective immediately, 100% of my company, every asset, every dollar, is being placed into a new organization I am launching tonight." Daniel's chest puffed out with pride, ready to hear his own name. "I am calling it the $150 Foundation," I announced. Daniel blinked, his smile freezing in place. Confusion flickered across his face. Vanessa's hands slowly lowered to her sides. "This foundation," I continued, projecting my voice over the rising murmurs of the crowd, "is dedicated entirely to protecting elderly people who have been financially and emotionally abused by their own families. It will provide legal protection, financial recovery, and complete support for parents and grandparents who have been discarded by the very children they raised. It exists specifically to hunt down and expose the sons and daughters who manipulate, rob, and abandon the parents who gave them everything." The ballroom fell into stunned, suffocating silence. The blood drained from Daniel's face. He looked like a man who had just been pushed off a cliff without warning. Vanessa looked like she might collapse right where she stood. "Let me be absolutely clear," I said, delivering the final blow with complete calm. "So there is no confusion about the future of everything I have built. My wealth belongs to the forgotten. It belongs to the betrayed. There will be no inheritance passed down through my bloodline. Not a single dollar will ever go to my son." The shockwave that ripped through the room was instant. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Down at the front, Daniel's polished mask completely shattered. The reality of what had just happened crashed down on him, and every dollar he had already spent in his imagination evaporated into nothing. He lunged forward, gripping the velvet rope with both hands, his face twisting into pure rage. He did not care about the cameras anymore. He screamed that I had lost my mind, that I was a confused old woman who did not know what she was doing. I did not raise my voice to argue with him. I simply reached into my pocket and pulled out a small remote. I pressed a single button, and the massive screen behind me flickered to life. The company logo vanished, replaced by a single image, blown up 30 feet tall for everyone in the room to see. A crumpled $150, and a handwritten note that said, "You will figure it out." I told the room this was the entire inheritance my only son left me 15 years ago, the week after I buried my husband. I explained how he tricked me into signing away my home while I was numb with grief and medication. I described coming home to find the locks changed, my life packed away, my family gone without a single goodbye. The silence in the ballroom shattered into a wave of shocked gasps and disgusted murmurs. Reporters turned their cameras away from the stage and aimed them directly at Daniel, capturing every second of his unraveling composure. If you have chills right now, type it in the comments. And if you believe every secret eventually comes into the light, hit that like button because the truth was only just beginning to come out. Before Daniel could recover, Vanessa grabbed a microphone from a stunned reporter standing nearby. Her voice cracked through the speakers, shrill and desperate, as she tried to spin a new lie on the spot, claiming I had abandoned them, claiming I was the one who disappeared. The crowd stared at her in disbelief, watching her unravel completely. Then, through the chaos, a new voice cut through the noise. Every head in the ballroom turned toward the back service doors, which had just swung open with a loud, echoing bang. Ethan walked down the center aisle, illuminated by the chandeliers overhead. He did not look like the terrified young man who had cried in that coffee shop booth 24 hours earlier. His shoulders were back. His jaw was set. He walked with purpose straight toward the stage. Vanessa froze near the velvet rope, staring at her son like she had seen a ghost. Daniel spun around and demanded to know what Ethan was doing there, ordering him to leave immediately. But Ethan did not stop walking. He stepped over the velvet rope, ignoring the stunned security guards, and walked straight up to his mother. He reached out and took the microphone directly out of her trembling hands. He looked at her, and in front of the entire room, he told her to stop lying. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Ethan turned to face the sea of reporters and, without hesitation, told them the complete truth. He explained that his entire life, his parents had told him his grandmother abandoned them, that she ran off with stolen money and left them to survive on their own. He told them how he had discovered, just one day earlier, that the real story was the exact opposite. He explained how his parents had left a grieving widow with nothing but a crumpled $150 while they built a life on money that never belonged to them. He told the stunned investors that his parents had not come to this gala to celebrate anyone's legacy. They came because their construction company was already bankrupt, and they needed someone to hide behind before federal agents arrived at their door. The ballroom erupted into complete chaos. Reporters shouted questions over each other. Investors pulled out their phones, calling their financial advisors to sever any remaining ties with Daniel's company. Vanessa collapsed against the velvet rope, sobbing as the reality of everything crashed down around her. But Daniel did not cry. Something inside him simply snapped. He let out a furious, unhinged shout and charged toward the stage, straight toward his own son, his fist already raised. I did not wait for security. I stepped directly into his path and pushed both hands hard against his chest. He stumbled backward, losing his balance completely, right as hotel security rushed onto the stage and pinned him to the floor. Through the chaos, Richard walked calmly onto the stage, carrying a thick folder stamped with a federal seal. He dropped it on the ground beside Daniel and, using the microphone Ethan had left behind, announced to the entire room the full extent of the embezzlement, the fake invoices, the millions stolen from innocent investors. The wailing sound of approaching police sirens grew louder outside the building, until finally, four federal agents walked through the front doors, badges shining under the chandeliers, and arrested Daniel right there on the stage in front of everyone who had once admired him. If your heart is racing right now, drop a comment below. And if you believe justice always eventually catches up to people, hit that like button because we are almost at the ending this story deserves. In the weeks that followed, The story of Daniel's arrest spread through every local news outlet. The trial itself did not take long. The evidence was overwhelming, and within a few months, a judge sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison, 1 single year for every year I had spent rebuilding my life from nothing. Vanessa avoided any serious charges, but she lost everything else: the house, the credibility, the life she had built on stolen money. The last I heard, she was living quietly with distant relatives, far away from the spotlight she once loved so much. As for Ethan, I did not hand him a check or erase his struggles overnight. I believe deeply that real strength comes from earning your own place in the world, not from being handed everything on a silver platter. Instead, I offered him a position at my foundation, working real hours, earning a real paycheck, learning firsthand how to help the very people his father once tried to exploit. He accepted without a single moment of hesitation. 2 years later, I sat in the front row of his college graduation, watching him walk across that stage with quiet pride glowing in his eyes. When he gave his speech, he did not talk about the scandal or the headlines. He talked about the true meaning of honesty, about the difference between the family you are born into and the family you choose to build through your own actions. He looked directly at me from that stage, and in front of the entire graduating class, he called me the strongest person he had ever known. I sat quietly outside my new home a few weeks later, watching the sunset stretch orange and gold across the sky. My phone rested silently on the table beside me, no longer buzzing with panicked calls or desperate lies. For the first time in 15 years, that silence did not feel empty. Felt like peace. I lost a son to greed, but I gained back a grandson who chose truth over comfort, and I built something far greater than any house or bank account ever could be. I built a place where people who have been discarded by their own families can finally feel protected again. If you believe silence is never a sign of weakness, but simply the calm before someone finally stands back up, type it in the comments below. And if this story touched you tonight, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories like this one, and I will see you in the next video.